provide a fair, balanced and proportionate system for all those who have been affected by events of the past. And as my honourable friend rightly says, progress on this, as I say, like other priorities, has been affected by COVID-19, but we are now moving forward and we intend to move forward as quickly as we can, ensuring that we're working across all communities.
Let's head over to Northern Ireland with the first of two questions from Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Sir Geoffrey.
Mr. Speaker, I would echo the comments of the Secretary of State in relation to the former Secretary of State and my constituency colleague Edwin Poots, and our thoughts and prayers are with both of them. Paragraph 11 of Annex A of the New Decade New Approach document commits the UK government to negotiating flexible arrangements for trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland under the Northern Ireland Protocol. And yet that has not happened, Mr. Speaker. And we've seen over the first few weeks of January the difficulty, the enormous difficulty that the protocol is causing for consumers and businesses alike in Northern Ireland. What is the Secretary of State going to do to resolve this problem?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman and I share a strong desire to ensure that we keep trade flowing as smoothly as possible, with unfettered access, as we promised, for Northern Ireland businesses, which we have delivered, but also ensure that we've got that smooth flow for Great Britain into Northern Ireland as well. And we're working closely, and I will continue to work closely with him and his colleagues in the Northern Ireland Executive as well to do so. I think it is important that we don't overstate some of the issues. That doesn't mean that there aren't issues. I appreciate there have been challenges. The grace periods, though, are working well. Goods are moving, and we are working closely with traders as they adapt, particularly here in Great Britain. Our focus is on taking this work forward to ensure that we can deal with the issues here permanently, continuing to take a pragmatic and a proportionate approach in maintaining Northern Ireland's integral place in the UK internal market. And he's quite right, as the Prime Minister rightly said last week, if we need to, we will not resist using Article 16 if it is appropriate and right to do so.
Going back to Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I support the comments that have been made by others earlier in this question time about the need for the UK government to work with the executive to deliver the payment scheme for victims. But there is another aspect of New Decade, New Approach that requires government commitment, and that is the full implementation of the Armed Forces Covenant in Northern Ireland. Will the Secretary of State assure me that when the Armed Forces Bill comes forward soon in Parliament, that Northern Ireland will be treated on exactly the same basis as the rest of the United Kingdom, with full implementation of the Armed Forces Covenant in Northern Ireland?
Yes. Further strengthening of the Armed Forces Covenant in law is both an NDNA commitment and a manifesto commitment for the government, and we are determined to deliver on that. He's quite right. The Ministry of Defence is working closely with my department and the devolved administrations to draft legislation that will ensure no former member of the UK Armed Forces is disadvantaged as a result of their service, and we are determined to deliver for the whole of the UK.
We have a substantive question to the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with permission, I will answer questions 9 and 10 together. A pragmatic and proportionate approach has been taken to implementing the Northern Ireland Protocol, protecting unfettered access for the whole of the UK market for Northern Ireland businesses, supporting businesses to adapt to new requirements, delivering the additional flexibilities and ensuring the protocol's operation reflects Northern Ireland's unique circumstances. Goods do continue to flow effectively and in normal volumes between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Initial issues, which I accept that there have been, are being addressed in consultation with businesses, and that work in itself will continue. We recognise the importance of a strong economy and strong social as well as economic links for Northern Ireland with the whole of Great Britain as part of the United Kingdom, and we need to ensure that they are impacted as little as possible on everyday lives, and the protocol itself sets out that very fact.
Let's head up to York to Rachel Maskell. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but it isn't working. The Northern Ireland Secretary has denied a border. The Prime Minister has denied border checks, yet the queues and chaos confirm both with new customs declarations and rules of origin, while businesses have had insufficient preparation time and insufficient support. So can the Secretary of State categorically say when, that means what date, there will be seamless movement of goods across the border, as I fear many in the supply chain will not withstand more chaos?
I'm not quite sure exactly what the Honourable Lady is referring to, because actually what she's described is not what's happening in Northern Ireland. The queues is not the issue. There have been reports of empty shelves, which is absolutely true. I've had Welsh ministers in meetings talk about the empty shelves in Wales that we all saw, partly as a result of the challenges that we saw at Dover and the Dover Straits just before Christmas due to COVID. There are some issues. There have been issues for parcels and parcel deliveries because the guidance, I fully accept, and I've outlined this, was published on the 31st of December, but it's not actually what the Honourable Lady outlined. And it is important that we work pragmatically and sensibly, looking at where the issues are to make sure that we find a way through these, working with business, so we get a permanent resolution, that the protocol can work and deliver that smooth, free flow of trade that we all want to see and is important for Northern Ireland.
Let's head down to Bristol with Curry McCarthy. Curry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It sounds to me like the Secretary of State has not been listening to the Road Haulage Association, who've warned that supply chains to Northern Ireland are close to collapse because of the problems with the new processes at the borders. As he says, there have been scenes in Belfast of empty shelves in supermarkets, but there's also been reports of hauliers losing huge amounts of money because lorries are having to return to Northern Ireland empty. So will the government listen to the Northern Ireland logistics sector and take urgent action to address this?
Well, as I said in my previous answer, actually, we are working with industry around some of the issues that they are facing. There are a range of different things. The issue that the Honourable Lady just referred to in terms of vehicles moving from Great Britain back into Northern Ireland is an issue about ensuring that Great Britain businesses are engaged with, and I would encourage businesses to engage with the Trader Support Service, which companies who have used that have found really good, easy way of free flow of goods. It's why supermarkets are able to get that good flow of products through. Companies like Marks & Spencer have seen a really good flow through, and I would encourage companies to sign up to that, which is a government-supported and paid-for scheme.
We now head up to Scotland with the SNP spokesperson, Kirstin Oswald. Kirstin Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster told me last week that there is an issue with groupage, but at the same time he said lorries were able to get into Northern Ireland without let or hindrance. And obviously these statements can't both be right. The experience of Northern Ireland hauliers will feel very familiar to Scottish hauliers and exporters. James Withers, Chief Executive of Scotland Food and Drink, has referred to crippling red tape. So it's clear this UK government is simply not on top of the Brexit problems at border crossings. How will the Secretary of State resolve groupage issues and the disruption which is causing such difficulty for businesses and consumers?
Well, as I said to the Honourable Lady, we've had, in previous questions, we've had a range of issues that have come together at the same time. Companies who have made commercial decisions before the deal was secured, before even the protocol was agreed before Christmas, let alone the guidance notes on parcels, and of course the COVID challenges we had. We've had a few issues come together in early January at the same time. On all of those issues, including ensuring that Great Britain businesses are signed up to the Trader Support Scheme and the Movement Advice Scheme. We are in Great Britain to ensure they understand that ability to flow product into Northern Ireland. We are working through that with businesses. But I think all of those businesses and people will continue to ensure and support the fact that the government secured a good deal with the EU. It's just a shame that the Scottish Nationalists decided to vote against it and effectively wanted to see no deal that would have seen real chaos both across Northern Ireland and Scotland.
Let's return to Northern Ireland with Gavin Robinson. Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for the considered engagement he has had over the last 7 to 10 days on the issue of steel. The Secretary of State knows just how important aerospace is, not only to my constituency of East Belfast, but to the Northern Ireland economy as a whole, with £1.9 billion worth of activity each year. ADS are concerned about the additional tariff which is now being placed on goods considered to be at risk for the aerospace sector. Yet when those goods or the raw materials are brought into Northern Ireland for processing, they can then subsequently leave Northern Ireland tariff-free because of the airworthiness agreement. There is an issue on these raw materials. They are not at risk for onward transit, and I'd be very keen for the Secretary of State to agree this morning that he will engage in this issue as constructively as he has with steel.
Secretary of State.
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for raising this issue. He has been a strong and passionate supporter and promoter of the sector for the benefit of Northern Ireland for a very long time, and I think everybody can recognise that. Now, he's outlined some of the specific details. We have been very clear that there should not be any tariffs on internal UK trade, and that we will make full use of waivers and reimbursements to minimise the impact on business in any scenario. I will be very happy to engage with the sector directly and with himself and any other colleagues on this particular issue. We have pledged 1.95 billion for aerospace research and development through to 2026, alongside 125 million of grants to be awarded through the Future Flight Challenge. So I think there is an opportunity for the industry, and I'll happily be keen to work with him to ensure that we can deliver on that for the people of Northern Ireland.
Let's head across the city to Claire Hannah. Claire Hannah.
I want to thank the Secretary of State for his words for Edwin Poots. Certainly everybody here is rooting for the Minister in his battle. Has the Secretary of State given any thought to structures which he can use to engage with the Irish Government on the protocol and other relevant issues now that they're not meeting within EU frameworks? And specifically, does he think the British-Irish Council or the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference can be used more constructively going forward?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her comments on Edwin Poots. When I had a communication with him this morning, he's determined and focused on continuing to do his good work for the people of Northern Ireland and to have a good and full recovery, as I know the Honourable Member for Bexley is as well, and Sidcup. Look, she's absolutely right. There are a range of ways, as she's outlined, that we can continue to engage. We are determined to do so. I know that the Taoiseach is very keen to build, as is the Prime Minister, a good, strong friendship and partnership with our closest neighbours in Ireland. I talk to the Minister Coveney on a regular basis. We also have quad meetings across with the Northern Ireland Executive, myself and Simon Coveney and other ministers where relevant. So we do have a good join up. We are determined to work together to make sure we do that for everybody across both Ireland and all of the United Kingdom.
Let's head across to Rob Roberts. Rob Roberts.
Thank you. Question 14, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State and I continue to hold regular discussions with Cabinet colleagues and the devolved administrations on this crucial issue. Although each devolved administration controls its own public health policy, we have been coordinating our responses to COVID, seeking alignment in policy and approach where appropriate to ensure that measures safeguard the health and well-being of the whole United Kingdom. Our commitment is demonstrated through the UK Government's procurement of vaccines and tests on behalf of all parts of the country, working with the devolved administrations to ensure they're deployed fairly across the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the world-leading steps that the government has taken to acquire and roll out the vaccine have benefited every part of the United Kingdom. Will my honourable friend confirm that Northern Ireland is benefiting and will continue to benefit from this vaccine rollout, which is only possible if our devolved administrations continue to work together as one union?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I'm pleased to see Northern Ireland now has the highest vaccination rate in the UK and indeed across any jurisdiction in Europe, with almost 6% of the population having been vaccinated. This clearly demonstrates the strength of the Union when we as four nations all work together. To date, over 114,000 people in Northern Ireland have successfully been vaccinated, including care home residents and health and social care staff. The vaccination programme began on the 8th of December, and by the 6th of January, the mobile teams have visited 91% of care homes and achieved uptake levels of 90% plus for residents and around 80% for staff.
Substantive question to Minister Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of important strands to our centenary programme, including historical understanding and engagement and supporting trade and investment, which showcase Northern Ireland's rich potential. We also want to focus on the future, especially Northern Ireland's young people, and will ensure that their voices are heard in the centenary programme. We recently announced £3 million to support this work, including a £1 million shared history fund, supporting the engagement of non-profit organisations across the UK with the centenary. We're continuing to develop these centenary plans and will publish them further over coming months.
Set up to Burnley with Anthony Higginbotham. Anthony Higginbotham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 2021 marks 100 years since the creation of Northern Ireland, which paved the way for the formation of the United Kingdom as we know it today. In Burnley and Padiham, we are proud unionists and want to share in the celebration of this momentous day. So could my right honourable friend set out what steps he's taking to make sure all parts of the United Kingdom can share in this celebration?
My honourable friend raises a really important point. Given the significance of this anniversary, we want to ensure marking the centenary has a lasting legacy both in Northern Ireland and right across the UK. The Shared History Fund will support the engagement of a wide range of arts, heritage, voluntary, community and other non-profit organisations across the whole of the United Kingdom, and we're engaging with departments across government, including the other territorial offices, the Cabinet Office and DCMS, as we continue to drive forward on this and other elements of our centenary programme.
Substantive question to the Minister.
I recognise the Honourable Lady's work on this important issue and appreciate the engagement we've had on this to date. Regulations have been in place to make provision for safe and lawful access to abortions since the 31st of March 2020. Some service provision has been available now since last April, with over 719 women and girls having been able to access services locally by mid-October last year. We take our moral and legal duties on this matter very seriously and remain disappointed that full abortion services remain to be commissioned by the Department of Health, which would be the most appropriate way to progress the matter. We continue to monitor the situation closely.
Heading to Walthamstow with Stella Creasy. Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a very familiar situation. The Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and a vulnerable woman have been left with no option but to take the UK government to court to ensure access to abortion at home. Except we are in a different situation because this House voted to require the Secretary of State to uphold these women's rights and ensure they could access abortion at home. With clear evidence, over 100 women have been refused abortions and that they are buying pills online again. Will the Secretary of State and the ministers confirm they will act to uphold UK legislation and save the UK taxpayer court costs and act to intervene now?
Well, I can confirm to the Honourable Lady we are continuing to engage with the Minister of Health and his department on commissioning full services and have been since the regulations came into effect, and we remain of the view that this is the most appropriate way to progress the matter. I'm pleased that the Northern Trust was able to resume its services earlier this year, and I'm hopeful that the South Eastern Trust will soon be able to do so as well. The government is, of course, continuing to fund access to services in England, particularly where local access may not be available, and even in the current circumstances, some women and girls have availed of those services. But we are continuing to monitor the situation closely, including considering further legislative action at Westminster at the appropriate time, should it be required.
Heading to Bristol with Shadow Minister Karen Smith. Karen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members across this House and indeed the country will be shocked that women are still not able to fully access services, that these services are still not being commissioned, and it is unconscionable that women are travelling against government advice in a pandemic because of a lack of service. Now, I hear what the Minister has said. I welcome his work on this issue. But as my honourable friend from Walthamstow has said, we seem to be back here again. Every day is a tragedy for women in Northern Ireland who are having to travel. So can the Minister expand on his comments? What will he consider doing? And crucially, how soon will he act?
Well, I recognise the strength of feeling behind what the Honourable Lady says, and it is the right of women and girls in Northern Ireland to access healthcare, including high-quality abortion care in the full range of circumstances set out in regulations. And I believe, as I think she does, that those rights should be the same across the United Kingdom. We are continuing to engage with the Minister of the Health and the Executive on this, and we do believe that this is best progressed by the Executive. But I reiterate my comment that we will closely monitor the situation and we will absolutely consider whether further legislation is required by this House.
I think over to Northern Ireland with Stephen Farry. Stephen Farry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister for his recent correspondence on this issue. There is considerable support in Northern Ireland for the change in the law, but unfortunately political games are being played. While it's better that there is local action, can the Minister confirm that he will not let this issue slip on indefinitely and he will act within a matter of months if there's no action taken by the Northern Ireland Executive?
Well, I'm grateful for the Honourable Gentleman's comments, and I recognise that he is one of those who's pressed hard on this issue. We recognise the urgency of this matter, but we also recognise the huge challenges facing the Executive and indeed every part of government related to the COVID situation. We do want to see progress on this issue. We would continue to prefer it to be delivered by the devolved institutions, but as I've said already, we stand ready to act if that progress is not made.
Remaining in Northern Ireland with Carla Lockhart. Carla Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is still a matter of deep regret that the overwhelming view of the people of Northern Ireland in wanting to protect life was and is still disregarded by those in this place. And I take a very contrary view to the member for North Down. Is the Minister concerned that in implementing in the government's terms adequate abortion provision in Northern Ireland under the current terms of Northern Ireland's abortion regulations, sex-selective abortion is permitted, as it permits abortion for any reason up to 12 weeks, within which time it is possible to determine the sex of the fetus, and what measures he will take to address this matter of deep concern.
Well, I recognise the Honourable Lady has taken a consistent and firm position on this issue, and the Government does take this issue very seriously. This is about protecting the rights of women and girls, and the regulations in Northern Ireland, as you will recognise, do not make any reference to sex-selective abortion, and they follow the same approach as the rest of the UK on this issue. The Government publishes an annual analysis on the male-to-female birth ratio for England and Wales to see if there is any evidence of this issue arising. The latest reports show no evidence to indicate that this is an issue in England and Wales. We will continue to report on sex birth ratio and will work with the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency to consider including Northern Ireland in this analysis in future years. But in the meantime, we will continue to monitor the implementation of the regulations and urge the Executive to move forward with commissioning.
Order. Before I call the Prime Minister, may I express on behalf of the House the best wishes to President Biden and Vice President Harris on this, the inauguration day. We now come to questions to the Prime Minister. I will first call the Prime Minister to answer the engagements question, and then I will call Alex Shelbrooke to ask his supplementary. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I know members from across the House will want to join me and echo you in congratulating President-elect Biden on his inauguration later today. As I said when I spoke with him on his election as President, I look forward to working with him and with his new administration, strengthening the partnership between our countries and working on our shared priorities, from tackling climate change, building back better from the pandemic, and strengthening our transatlantic security. Mr. Speaker, our sympathies also go out to those affected by the latest floods, and I want to thank the Environment Agency and our emergency services for the work they're doing to support these communities, and I'll be chairing a COBRA meeting later on to coordinate the national response. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I'll have further such meetings later today.
Right, let's head up to Yorkshire with Alex Shelbrooke. Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I start by fully associating myself with all of the Prime Minister's opening comments. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister join me in welcoming the fact that free school meal pupils in Elmet and Rothwell will continue to receive free lunches over the forthcoming school holidays, thanks to the winter grant fund provided to Leeds City Council by this government?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. I can confirm that eligible pupils in Leeds will continue to receive free school meal support over the February half-term, and this Conservative government has given over £2 million to Leeds City Council through the COVID winter grant scheme to support vulnerable families in the coldest months, and it is the intention of this government, this side of the House, that no child should go hungry this winter as a result of the COVID pandemic.
Let's come to the Leader of the Opposition, Right Honourable Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also welcome the inauguration of President Biden and Vice President Harris? It's a victory for hope over hate and a real moment for optimism in the US and around the world. Can I also thank all of those on the front line helping to deliver the vaccine, including the NHS, who are also doing so much to keep us safe under the most extraordinary pressure. Mr. Speaker, it's 10 days since the Home Office mistakenly deleted hundreds of thousands of vital criminal records, including fingerprints, crime scene data and DNA records. So can the Prime Minister tell the House how many criminal investigations could have been damaged by this mistake?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Home Office is actively working to assess the damage, and as the Right Honourable Gentleman will know from the urgent question that was held in the House only a few days ago, they believe that they will be able to rectify the results of this complex incident, and they hope very much that they'll be able to restore the data in question.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, that's not an answer to my question. And it was the most basic of questions. It was the first question that any Prime Minister would have asked of those briefing him. How many criminal investigations have been damaged? So let me ask the second basic question that any Prime Minister would have asked those briefing him. How many convicted criminals have had their records wrongly deleted?
I answered the first question entirely accurately, Mr. Speaker, because we don't know how many cases might be frustrated as a result of what has happened, but I can tell him that 213,000 offence records, 175,000 arrest records and 15,000 person records are currently being investigated because they are the subject of this problem.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I have a letter here from the National Police Chiefs Council. It makes it clear that 403,000 records from the police national computer may have been deleted. In addition to that, Prime Minister, this is from the National Police Chiefs Council. I'm sure has been briefed on this. In addition to that, 26,000 DNA records from the DNA database and 30,000 fingerprint records from the fingerprints database. So this isn't just a technical issue. It's about criminals not being caught and victims not getting justice. This letter makes clear that it includes data from criminals convicted of serious offences. It has impacted live police investigations already, and it includes records, including DNA, marked for indefinite retention following the conviction for serious offences. Mr. Speaker, that's the most serious offences. That's why it's indefinite retention. It's been deleted. So is the Prime Minister seriously telling us that 10 days after this incident came to light, he still hasn't got to the bottom of the basic questions, and he can't tell us how many cases have been lost, how many serious offenders this concerns, and how many police investigations have been investigated?
Mr. Speaker, it's becoming a feature of the right honourable gentleman's questions that he fails to listen to the answer that I have just given. And let me repeat, because he said that I think he gave a figure of 413,000. I've just done some maths briefly in my head. And if you look at if you add 213,000 to 175,000, you get to plus 15,000, which is the numbers I get, Mr. Speaker, you get to 403,000. If only he'd bothered to do that essential, that swift computation in his head, he would have had the answer before he stood up and claimed not to receive it. It was there in the previous answer, Mr. Speaker. Of course, it is outrageous that any data should have been lost, but at the moment we are trying, as I said in my first answer, Mr. Speaker, we're trying, which I hope he heard, we're trying to retrieve that data.
The Prime Minister complains about not listening to answers. The figure I quoted was 403,000. That'll be in Hansard. So, Prime Minister, that was the figure, plus the 26,000, plus, I said 403,000, plus 26,000, plus 30,000. Let me try the next most simple question, Prime Minister, that you would have asked of anyone briefing. How long will it take for all the wrongly deleted records to be reinstated to the police database?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that will depend on how long it takes to recover them. I can tell them that people are working round the clock, having been briefed on this both by my staff and also, of course, by the policing minister. We're working round the clock on this issue. And any loss of data is, of course, unacceptable. But it is this government, thanks to the robust, the strong economy that we've had for the last few years, that we've been able to invest massively in policing and to drive crime down. And that is the most important thing of all, Mr. Speaker. And I have no doubt that we will be able to continue to do that by relying on excellent data.
Yes, Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the Home Secretary said that the Home Office was still washing through the data. We don't know where the records are, and they may have to be, if you can believe this, re-entered manually, which will obviously take a long, long time. The letter from the National Police Chiefs Council also makes clear that the obvious place to reinstate from, which is the DNA database or the fingerprint database, have themselves also been compromised, and so his answers need to be seen in that light. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to another of the Home Secretary's responsibilities. Last night, the Home Secretary told a Conservative Party event that, and these were her words, on should we have closed our borders earlier, the answer is yes. I was an advocate, says the Home Secretary, of closing them last March. Why did the Prime Minister overrule the Home Secretary?
Mr. Speaker, I think it was last March that the right honourable gentleman, along with many others, was actually saying that we didn't need to close borders. But as usual, Captain Hindsight has changed his tune to suit events. We are facing, and it's interesting that his first few questions were about a computer glitch in the Home Office, Mr. Speaker, which we're trying to rectify. We're in the middle of a national pandemic, and this country is facing a very, very grave death toll. And we are doing everything we can to protect the British public, which is, I think, what he would expect. And that's why we've instituted one of the toughest border regimes in the world. That's why we insist that you have to get a test 72 hours before you fly. There must be a passenger locator form, which you have to provide, Mr. Speaker, and then you must quarantine for 10 days or 5 days if you do a second test. And it's all very, I'm delighted that he now praises the Home Secretary. It's a change of tune from the right honourable gentleman, and I'm delighted that he's now in favour of tough border controls, because he wasn't last year, Mr. Speaker, and indeed he campaigned for the leadership of the Labour Party on a manifesto to get back to free movement, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, he talks of hindsight. What the Home Secretary said last night, Prime Minister, it's not disputed, is that she was saying last March, this is not hindsight, she, the Home Secretary, was saying to the Prime Minister, you need to shut your borders. She was saying it. So I repeat the question that the Prime Minister avoided. Why did he overrule the Home Secretary, who claims that she said last March that we should shut our borders?
Mr. Speaker, we've instituted one of the toughest border regimes in the world, and it was only last March that he, along with many others in his party, were continuing to support an open border approach. And I must say that the whole experience of listening to the right honourable gentleman over the last few months has really been like listening to a weather vane, watching a weather vane spin round and round depending on where the breezes are blowing. And we're getting on, Mr. Speaker, with tackling this pandemic through the most practical means that are available to us, rolling out a vaccine programme that has now inoculated 4.2 million people in our country, and whereas he would have joined the EU scheme, if I seem to remember, he attacked the vaccine task force, which secured the supplies on which we are now relying, and he stood on a manifesto, Mr. Speaker, at the last election to unbundle the very pharmaceutical companies on whose breakthroughs this country is now relying. They continue to look backwards, to play politics, to snipe from the sidelines. We look forwards and get on with the job.
Let the weather vane take me up to Aylesbury with Rob Butler. Rob Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The national rollout of COVID-19 vaccinations is an absolutely tremendous success story. But it's only in the past few days that over 80-year-olds in Aylesbury have been able to get their first jabs. And many of my constituents have contacted me to say they're frustrated and worried that they've been either forgotten or pushed to the back of the queue. So can my right honourable friend assure them that everyone in the Aylesbury area in the most vulnerable groups will be vaccinated by the middle of February?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for everything he does to fight for the interests of the people of Aylesbury, and I can confirm that we're on track to deliver our pledge, though it is very hard. I must stress to the House it is very hard because of constraints on supply. We're on track to deliver a first vaccine to everyone in the top 4 cohorts by mid-February, including the people of Aylesbury.
Let's head up to Scotland with the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This afternoon, millions around the world will breathe a massive sigh of relief when President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are sworn into office. The Democratic removal of Donald Trump gives us all hope that better days are ahead of us, that days will be a little bit brighter. Turning the page on the dark chapter of Trump's presidency isn't solely the responsibility of President Joe Biden. It is also the responsibility of those in the Tory party, including the Prime Minister, who cozied up to Donald Trump and his callous worldview. Mr. Speaker, this morning, the former Prime Minister, the member for Maidenhead, accused the current Prime Minister of abandoning moral responsibility on the world stage by slashing international aid. So if today is to be a new chapter, if today is to be a new start, will the Prime Minister begin by reversing his cruel policy of cutting international aid for the world's poorest?
Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important the Prime Minister of the UK has the best possible relationship with the President of the United States. That's part of the job description, as I think all sensible members opposite would acknowledge. And when it comes to global leadership on the world stage, this country is embarking on a quite phenomenal year. And we've already, with the G7, with COP26, and we've already led the world with the Gavi Summit for global vaccination, raising $8.8 billion. It was the UK, the first major country in the world to set a target of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. All other countries are following. We hope that President Biden will join us. We're working to promote global free trade. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we'll work with President Biden to secure the transatlantic alliance and NATO, which of course the Scottish Nationalist Party would unbundle. Well, I think they would. I don't know what their policy is on our armed services. I think they would break them up. Perhaps they'd like to explain.
It's the Scottish National Party. I know you keep having a memory lapse on it. Ian Blackford. I somehow think we've lost Ian Blackford. We'll come back to him. Nicole Richards. Come. Nicola, you're muted. Press the mic.
I'm not muted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Speak. Get the question. The Prime Minister's desperate.
Can you hear me? It's not working.
We'll now move on. We'll come back. We're now going to move on to Ed Davey. Have we got Ed Davey?
Good morning. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Can I add my warmest of welcomes to President Biden and Vice President Harris on their inauguration in Washington today. Mr. Speaker, in answer to my question in July, the Prime Minister promised an independent inquiry into the UK's response to COVID. In the 6 months since, COVID cases have soared, our NHS is on its knees, and 50,000 more people have died. The UK now has one of the highest death rates in the world, higher even than Trump's America. To learn the lessons from what's gone so devastatingly wrong under his leadership, will the Prime Minister commit to launching the inquiry he promised last year, this year?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he answers his own question with the preamble that he set out. The NHS is under unprecedented pressure. The entire British state that is trying to fight COVID and to roll out the biggest vaccination programme in the history of our country. And that includes virtually every single arm of officialdom. The idea that we should now consecrate state resources, vast state resources, to an inquiry now in the middle of the pandemic does not, I think, seem sensible to me, and I don't believe it would seem sensible to members of the House. But of course, we will learn lessons in due course, and of course, there will be a time to reflect and to prepare for the next pandemic.
Let's reconnect with Ian Blackford for his second question. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think people would find the Prime Minister's claims about the UK's global leadership a bit more believable if last night he hadn't ordered his MPs to vote down an amendment to the trade bill that would have stopped trade deals with countries who commit genocide. Mr. Speaker, genocide isn't a matter of history. It is happening in our world right now. The international community has stood idly by as Uyghur Muslim men, women and children are forced into concentration camps in China's Xinjiang province. Yesterday, the outgoing US Secretary of State officially said that genocide was taking place, and the incoming Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, agrees with his view. Is the Prime Minister prepared to follow that lead? Is he prepared to stand up today and clearly state that genocide is being committed against the Uyghur population in China? If he is, will he urgently work with the new Biden administration
Prime Minister.
bring this to the UN Security Council.
Prime Minister.
So that international pressure can be brought to bear on China.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman knows very well that the attribution of genocide is a judicial matter, but I can say for myself that I regard what is happening in Xinjiang and what's happening to the Uyghurs as utterly abhorrent, and I know that members on all sides of the House share that view. And I commend to him the excellent statement by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, very recently on what was happening there and the steps we are taking to protect, to prevent British commercial engagement with goods that are made by forced labour in Xinjiang, and the measures the steps we are taking against what is happening. But what I might ask him, in all sincerity, is what he would propose by way of a Scottish national, or not nationalist, but national foreign policy. Would he break up the Foreign Office? Would he break up the FCDO, which after all has a big branch in East Kilbride?
Let us head to West Bromwich again with Nicola Richards. Nicola Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week we mark Holocaust Memorial Day. Remember the 6 million Jewish men, women and children murdered by the Nazis and pay tribute to the extraordinary survivors. Will the Prime Minister join me in thanking the Holocaust Educational Trust for organising a live webcast for students across the country to tune in and hear the testimony of survivor Eve Kugler on the 26th of January, and ask all members to encourage their schools to join Q3 Academy Great Bar from West Bromwich East in taking part?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right to warn us of the need to continue to inoculate our populations, ourselves, against the wretched virus of anti-Semitism, which has a tendency to recur and reinfect societies, including, tragically, our own. And I, of course, am very happy to join my honourable friend in encouraging all members to ask all schools, as the excellent Q3 Academy in Great Bar is doing, to tune in to the event that she mentions.
Head to Yorkshire with Alexander Stafford. Alexander Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Both I and many residents across Rother Valley are very concerned about crime, drug use, including from nitrous oxide capsules, and antisocial behaviour. Will the Prime Minister back my campaign and call on the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner for South Yorkshire to restore a police presence and even reopen a police station on Dinnington High Street?
Mr. Speaker, well, there could be no more fervent and effective advocate for the people of Rother Valley than my honourable friend, and I'm sure that he has much support for his campaign for a police station. I hope that a solution can be found. In the meantime, I can reassure him that we are making sure that there will be the police officers, the police men and women, to put in that police station, because, as you know, we are delivering, Mr. Speaker, on our commitment to have 20,000 more police over the lifetime of this Parliament.
Let's head over to Northern Ireland with Claire Hanna. Claire Hanna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, contrary to the view of every political party here and all of those involved in logistics and retail, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland said last week that there's no border in the Irish Sea and that disruption to supplies was a COVID issue and nothing to do with Brexit or the protocol. The papers are reporting your plans to woo the Biden administration through the topic of Northern Ireland as they and we try to move on from Trump and Trumpism. Would being straight with the people in Northern Ireland not be a good start?
Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady, I think, may know from what I said, I think, to the Liaison Committee several times, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Actually, there's more transit now taking place between Larne and Stranraer and Cairnryan than there is between Holyhead and Dublin, because it's going so smoothly.
Let's head up to Harborough with Neil O'Brien. Neil O'Brien.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm so sorry. It's excellent that we are leading Europe in vaccinations, and it's excellent that we now have strong health borders. But as the virus bounces around the world, there is a real risk that it will mutate and be able to dodge the vaccines or reduce their efficacy. And there's concerning data from South Africa in that respect. Will the government develop a new rapid pathway to allow the approval of new variations of the vaccines so that we can shut down any new strains quickly?
Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed. My honourable friend makes an incredibly important point, and we've been talking about that with the scientists over the last days and weeks intensively, just in the last few hours. And we're confident that the MHRA will be in a position to turn around new applications for new variants of vaccines as may be required to deal with new variants of the virus, Mr. Speaker.
Let's head up to Lancashire with Rosie Cooper. Rosie Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Lorries containing food produce sitting idle for days is a stark reminder that if post-Brexit Britain is to be self-sufficient, protecting our food production through infrastructure investment is crucial. So could the Prime Minister provide the infrastructure investment essential to tackling flooding in West Lancashire by giving the Environment Agency enough funding both to keep the old crossings pumps operational and to maintain the watercourses? This will be vital to ensure that the rich food-producing lands of West Lancashire, essential to the security of food supplies and our local and national economy, are better defended, as well as protecting
Prime Minister, we've got to get through the questions. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I could have heard almost any amount about the rich food producing parts of West Lancashire, because she's entirely right, and we will protect those areas, and she's entirely right to call for flood defences. That's why we put £5.2 billion over 6 years into flood defences, including the Crossons pumping station refurbishment scheme, which the Honourable Lady mentions, which we've invested £5.7 million to protect nearly 4,000 homes.
Let's head to Devon with Sigurry Street. To Sigurry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the South West has an ambitious programme to build back better in both the green and blue sectors, investing in both clean growth and marine high-tech clusters. But to do so, we will need continued investment in our infrastructure. Will my right honourable friend assure us that levelling up does not just involve the north, but every region of the United Kingdom, including the South West? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the potential of the South West, the Greater South West, is enormous, and particularly in the areas of green technology, of blue and green technology. And he can be assured that we will be giving massive investment in infrastructure to support that green industrial revolution in the South West, as well as in all parts of the UK.
Let's staying in Devon with Ben Bradshaw. Ben Bradshaw.
When the Prime Minister told fishermen in the South West that they would not face new export barriers or unnecessary form filling, and when he told Britain's musicians and artists they would still be free to tour and work in the rest of the European Union after Brexit, neither of those statements were correct, were they, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely true that some British fishermen have faced barriers at the present time owing to complications over form filling, and indeed one of the biggest problems is that, alas, there is a decline in appetite for fish in continental markets just because most of the restaurants, as he knows, are shut. But the reality is that Brexit it will deliver and is delivering a huge uplift in quota already in the next 5 years, Mr. Speaker, and by 2026 the fishing people of this country will have access to all the fish in all the territorial waters of this country, and to get them ready for that El Dorado, Mr. Speaker, we're investing £100 million in improving our boats, our fish processing industry, and getting fishing ready for the opportunities ahead.
Seven Oaks, we're going to with Laura Trott. Laura Trott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary for the recent strengthened guidance to allow parents access to neonatal intensive care units whenever they need to in this pandemic. Can the Prime Minister confirm that compliance with this guidance will be monitored? And can he reassure parents once and for all that we know that they are integral to their child's care in hospital and they are not just visitors?
Prime Minister.
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend I know that she knows of what she speaks, and she's completely right to say that partners in care should not be, their partners in care, they should not be considered as visitors. That's why the current guidance has been put in place. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we will be monitoring it to ensure that it is observed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 7th of March of this year, my constituent Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's unjustified 5-year prison sentence will finally come to an end. Could I ask the Prime Minister what assurances has he had from the Iranian authorities that Nazanin will have her ankle tag removed, that she will get her British passport back, and that she will be allowed to board a flight back to the UK in 45 days' time?
I can tell the honourable lady, who I know has campaigned hard and well on behalf of her constituent, and quite rightly, that we're working virtually around the clock to secure the release of all the dual nationals that concern us in Tehran. And without going into the details of the cases, which, as she knows, are complex, we're doing everything we can to secure what we regard as the completely unjustified detention in Tehran of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, though, as she knows, she is now out on furlough, admittedly in the conditions that she describes.
Let's head up to Yorkshire with Jason McCartney. Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With Yorkshire leading the way in the vaccine rollout, does the Prime Minister agree that once we've vaccinated the most vulnerable, the elderly and our wonderful health and social care workers, we should then look at prioritising vaccinating police officers, emergency service workers, carers, teachers, nursery staff, and all those whose essential daily work brings them into contact with other people?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a great advocate for his constituents in Coal Valley, and I much enjoy my exchanges with him, and I can thank him for what he's saying about those groups. We must rely on what the JCVI has to say, the priorities that the experts have decided. But of course, we want to see those groups that he mentions vaccinated as soon as possible. I'm very pleased that in spite of all the difficulties in supply, last week we gave 1.5 million people their first dose, Mr. Speaker, up 500,000 on the week before.
Let's head up to Scotland with Stuart C. MacDonald. Stuart C. MacDonald.
Mr. Speaker, when we praise our social care workers for their immense response to the pandemic, that includes over 100,000 care workers from the EU. But new research from the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants shows many of them don't know anything about the Prime Minister's EU settlement scheme, and many more don't know that they must apply by the end of June. So we could see thousands of essential care workers and possibly hundreds of thousands of valued EU nationals losing their rights to live and work here overnight on 1st of July. So will the Prime Minister please cancel or postpone the application deadline, or better still, extend the rights of EU nationals in the UK automatically, just as he previously promised to do?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank him for what he's done just now to draw attention to the scheme, but I must say that I must disagree with him respectfully about the ignorance in which our wonderful EU nationals have been, because 4 million of them, Mr. Speaker, have successfully applied and been given residence, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the scheme that we've instituted. And it's a great success. We pay tribute to the wonderful EU nationals in our country who do a fantastic job for this country.
Let's head up to Northampton with Andrew Lewis. Andrew Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. For many years, my right honourable friend wrote humorous articles that nevertheless made serious points about individual freedom and the dangers of over-regulation. The Department of Health and Social Care is currently consulting on how to increase regulations on food advertising significantly. Can my right honourable friend reassure me that any implementation of this consultation will be in line with his and my long-held principles?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I remain a champion of liberty in all its aspects, but I'm also the living embodiment of the risks of obesity, Mr. Speaker. And there's no question that it is a comorbidity factor in the pandemic, and I think that's something that the people of this country understand, and they understand that it is all of our individual responsibility to do what we can to get healthy, to stay healthy, because that's one of the ways, Mr. Speaker, we can all help protect our NHS.
Let's head to Poplar with Apsana Begum. Apsana.
Doctors, researchers, experts, campaigners and my constituents, of whom just under two-thirds are from BAME backgrounds, including a large Bangladeshi population, have all observed the COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately affecting BAME communities. The Royal College of GPs have even requested these communities be prioritised for vaccine rollout. Will the Prime Minister finally recognise that this disparity is as a result of structural racism, and can he outline what his government are doing to address this issue?